Hello and welcome. This is the live terrain editor. With it you'll be able to edit your terrain while in game mode. So while we're here, let's have a look and see what it will do. As you can see, we have a scene open. This is the demo scene that's supplied, and in it has most of the functionality already set up for you. So if we hit play, we'll jump right in and see what it will do. Right, as you can see, we've got our terrain set up already with a green layer for texture. From left to right, we've got our brush strength slider, brush size slider, which as you can see increases and decreases your brush size. We've also got a terrain height limiter. This we'll get to in a minute. We've got a drop down menu with the basic functions of raise, lower, flatten, smooth, paint and set height. Next we have our brushes. These brushes are supplied, but you can change them for your own if you wish. The next selection is your paint layers. These are also basic layers that have been supplied, but recommend that you replace them for your own. And then at the far end we've got the basic close program button. With our current brush selected, we can now just paint on the terrain and make something. You can change our brush size. We can change our brush itself. And of course we can change the strength, which increases its speed that it works at. So if you want to do something quickly, this helps. If you want more fine control, take it down to a lower number and it'll move more slower for you to do finer control. If we select the terrain height, let's put it to say 30, and we go to our flatten option, it'll bring the terrain up to that height and stop. If we use a flatter brush for info, we can then see how it takes it to that level. And of course we can change that, and we'll bring it all up wherever we paint to that level, or if we want to just stop somewhere in between, we can. We've also got a smooth, which will slowly smooth out any roughness that may have been painted on. And just to see, we can use the lower to still lower down as well. And then lastly, the terrain height also works with the set height. Now if we select it and now click on the terrain, it will lift the whole terrain in its entirety to that level. This is normally used when starting on a project, if you're wanting to have the terrain higher, and then you can lower down to create water bodies or lakes, but then have your ground level at a particular height. So then we can have a nice little pond With a bit of a mountain on the side of it, maybe. Maybe it's a lake, who knows. And then we can smooth it out to give a bit of character to the landscape. The set height and the flatten both take their information from the terrain height slider. Now if we go to the paint section and we shrink down our brush, we can now select one of our paint layers and paint on the terrain. And then give it a bit of a nice little rocky colour. Take the strength right down, and let's give it a bit of a streaky look. Well, it's not exactly a work of art, but you get the idea. And then we can close it down. And it takes us back to our main window. As you can see, currently any work done in game will persist when in edit mode. This functionality can be changed if required. If we go to the main object and go into the inspector view, here we can see that we've got different options here. If I drag it out to see it better, first of these to select from is undo terrain changes on exit. If I select there now, we'll do a quick demo and see how that works. Right, now we've got what we were creating earlier, so let's just ramp up and just create something. Now we exit, notice it's gone, go back into game view and it's still gone. The next function to select, if you're wanting to use it, is autosave terrain on exit. This can be used by itself, so you don't need to undo changes on exit, depending on what you wish, but you can use them together. So as an example, we do it again after selecting the save terrain on exit, and now let's make it a bit quicker. So there's a little bit of a random range there of some sort. We exit, and it's gone back to what it was before. However, because we have done a save on exit, when we go back in, it should, no, which it hasn't. That's annoying. Right, undo change. Let's try. forgot is that we need to load it back on start. So here we can now load what we've saved when we start up. Obviously we've not done anything yet, so let's put the other setting back quickly. Let's go undo changes on exit. Now when we modify the terrain, and we exit, it will return to what it was before we started playing. But because we've hit save on exit and load terrain data on start, when we hit play mode again, it will load what we were doing. So there is a save on the back. Now the last functionality, which can be used by itself or with the others, is clear terrain data on start. What this will do is zero out all the information and painting. So if we unselect them and click on clear terrain data on start, as you can see, it's zeroed out everything. And we go back and it's all gone. This functionality can be helpful or useful if you're loading in new terrains that need fresh editing each time you load your game, or you want to zero out your terrain before loading in an existing terrain that's already there. So if we undo the clear terrain, but we hit the load terrain now, hit play, because we've got a saved terrain already in the back, it will load what we had before. Just remember, if you bring in your terrain that you've already made elsewhere, make sure that you do not select the clear terrain data on start unless you already have your terrain data saved somewhere else. Once your terrain has got a save point, you're safe to play with it. So let's redo that again, but this time we'll do some different editing. Let's just do a bit of painting. Now this lovely masterpiece, if we just close down, will be lost. However, there is a shortcut key on the keyboard to save your terrain. Just push O on the keyboard and it will briefly pause, save, and done. Now if we close down, it will persist. If we clear data again, it will remove it. And now to load a save, hit P on the keyboard and it will load in if it wasn't already preloaded. So if you wanted to, you could create a save straight away after loading in your terrain. Just make sure that clear terrain data on start is not selected. Start the game with your terrain in and hit O to make a save. Speaking of saves, if you look in the inspector, we've got our names here currently set to Terrain 1 and Terrain 1 Alpha. That will save your terrain map and your alpha layers for your paint. Something else to note, if we go back into play mode, you'll notice that the brush does not conform to the terrain. It's just a flat brush. This is unfortunately a limitation on the standard renderer. So we will now move over to Universal Render Pipeline and see what it's supposed to look like if you use the URP settings. Right, here we are in Unity 2020 in a URP project for the Universal Render Pipeline. If we now hit play on this one, this is the exact same project as before with only one modification. So if we just do a bit of painting on the terrain, one thing you'll notice straight away is that the brush is now looking much nicer and conforming to the terrain. I'm sure this is how most people want it to work. So with this, we will now look at a basic setup and how to change the brush over if you're going to be using the Universal Render Pipeline. Here we are in a standard Unity project. This is the default one that comes with the Universal Render Pipeline setup. What we'll first do is import our game project. So we go our assets, import package, and we import the live terrain editor. Alright, let's change a bit of resize here so we can get a better look. Right, first things to do is to navigate to our folder and open up the demo scene, and we get a lovely pink. This is because Unity does not automatically sort out its textures from different versions, so we'll have to do a bit of maintenance here. First thing to do is we need to change the terrain. So we select our terrain and delete it. Don't worry about any saved terrain data, that is separate. The terrain in the hierarchy is just an object that we paint on. Next we go game object, new 3D object, and we create a new terrain. We'll leave it as terrain. Let's orientate ourselves a bit better. There we go. Next thing to do is to sort out our brush. So we select our brush. As you can see, we need to change its shader. So what we need to do now is go down into our project, go into textures, and here we've got our previous brush material, but we need to create a new material, so we'll do that now. So we go create and we go new material. And we'll just call it URP material. And then we take it and we drag it on top of our brush and select the brush again. We go to inspector and here we can see our material has been applied. While we've got it there, we now go into the shader And here we go Universal Render Pipeline, NeloCat extension, Screen Space Decal, Unlit. Next thing we need to do is do a bit of brush maintenance. Give it a bit of a square look. Let's move it. Well, let's have a close look at it for the moment. There it is. Looking all lovely and white. Let's give it a default texture so we can see what's going on. And let's choose a random one. As you can see, it doesn't look like the texture we just placed. That's because we need to rotate our cube that we just created. So we go onto the X rotation and rotate it by 90. And there we go. So your values should be 20, 20, 20 on the scale, and X rotation 90, and the others all zeroed out. Location, position will be whatever you want it to be. It'll be moved when the mouse pointer moves it around the map anyway, so you don't need to worry about that. Next, we'll give it a quick test and see what we get. And it looks a bit funky, and we haven't full screened, so let's do that quickly. Alright, maximize and play again. And we can't see anything at the moment. But as you can see, if we paint, something is happening. Okay, now for this shader to work, we need to go down into our project, go to settings, and here in the universal IRP high quality asset, we need to come across and set depth texture to true, and depending what your project is using, you need to do the same for the low and medium quality settings as well. Now hopefully we'll be able to see our brush. There we go. Alright, let's sort out how he looks. Is it that? Yep. Right, seems like we need to change our setting here. There we go. Let's see how that works. There we go, that's fixed our texture. However, it seems like our texture is squished and only half the size. Right, let's fix one first, then we'll do the other. Right. The first problem, as you had noticed, is that the terrain was going larger on its stencil than what the brush was giving. This can be easily fixed if you're starting from scratch, but if you're importing your own terrain, you need to change these settings to your terrain. Here in the main project, in the inspector, you can see our terrain dimensions. You got your width, your length, your height, detail resolution, height map resolution, text map resolutions, all of these are what the terrain is set to. But now if we go to our new terrain that we created and go into its settings, you will see that some of them are not the same. Height map resolution is less, detail resolution is less, so consequently the measurements are not matching up. If your project has its own settings here, you'll need to, in the main window, change these to match your project settings. But for this, all we need to do is click Clear Terrain Data, and this will reset everything. And now when we paint, we can see that it's the same size as the brush now. However, we still need to fix the stretching of the brush. This, if we go into our script, we need to change a couple of lines. There we go. Here in our update method, this is our standard line. We need to comment that one out and uncomment these two for URP and save. Now let's go back and run it again. Oh, has it compiled? Should have. Try again. There we go. It all seems to be working as intended. Now another thing to notice is that although we have our layers set up for our paint, if we go back into it again, and we select any one of them and go onto the paint, you'll notice nothing's getting painted. That is because you need to set up your layers. So we'll do that now quickly. We go to terrain, go to paint. Yeah. I'll change that for a second. Let's speed up working and turn off global illumination and baking. Anything else? No, that should be it. So now we go into our paint. We go paint texture, edit terrain layers, and here you can create one yourself from scratch, or you can add. We already have some supplied, so just add them in sequence. So you put that one first, add a layer, and there we've got our layers in. Now if we go back to the map, hit paint, you can now paint. And this has been a basic overview and basic setup of the live terrain editor. For more in-depth setup from scratch, there is documentation in the project. Oh, that was a bit close. So in the project we do have a setup doc that you can be reading, and will tell you how to set up from scratch if you need to. Now lastly, we've got some navigation functions to look at for while in game mode. So first, let's see what they are. So go back into game mode, and let's just build some reference points quickly. Now, all navigation can be done with your right mouse button. So select the mouse anywhere currently, and while holding it, you can rotate around the center point, reposition your mouse, click again, it will center to that point. Also, it'll lock the height at that point as well. Good for being able to orbit around any work that you need to do. This functionality can be altered. So if we go into our camera, where our camera script is, we can see that here in the inspector we've got our orbit functions. So if we go back into game, and let's just do that. When we right click, orbit is selected there. This is just for visual aid, so you can make it a private function if you wish to. Fixed distance, that is also a possible private function. That is done with the F key on the keyboard. Auto distance and mouse rotate can be used differently as well. So you can rotate around the center. It doesn't matter where you click on the terrain, it's not going to move the center point. You can use your WASD keys to navigate in and out and do a fly around, and then you can orbit your given center point without the mouse affecting that position. If you click on mouse rotate again, now wherever you click the mouse becomes your new center point. So if you want to go there on the top of this point, that point now is your center point that you're going to be orbiting around. Depending on your needs, you can have this on or off, or select it in game. These can be played with at your leisure, so you'll then be able to test them, see how they work for you, if you like them, if not, WA is D for moving around. If you hold the space bar and W, you fly over, and S, you fly back. If you just have W and S on their own, you fly in and you fly out. A and D will always be side strafing. And that is the final look. Hope you enjoy it, and thank you very much.